What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Questions You Never Thought to Ask, the Whitewater Kayak podcast. My name is Seth Ashworth, and this week I'm going to be talking with whitewater kayaker Geoff Calhoun about increasing participation in whitewater kayaking and in paddle sports generally, and what we can all do as a community to work together to try and achieve that goal so we can have more people kayaking and have more friends. I think that's pretty important. Just before we get into the recording from this week, I wanted to say a big sorry that the scheduling has once again been a bit sporadic on this podcast. I'm doing my best to maintain that every other week schedule, but sometimes it just doesn't pan out, or I just can't schedule people I want to talk to kind of in the timeline that we're looking for. But hopefully things are going to be back on track for the next few bi-weekly periods, but we will see how it goes. And finally, I'd like to say a big shout out thank you to the people who support this podcast on Patreon. Patreon is a crowdfunding platform where you can chip in a couple of bucks every month, and it just helps me cover the cost of keeping this show on the road. If you are interested in supporting via that way, you can check me out on patreon.com/Seth Ashworth. And if you can, if you can't, that's cool too. I'm not super worried about it. But if you can, I would really appreciate it. Okay, well, that's it. That's all. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I will see you next week. Peace. Welcome back to Question You Never Thought to Ask, the Whitewater Kayak podcast. This week I'm joined with Geoff Calhoun, who on a recent episode of another kayaking podcast, The Hammer Factor, I think it's fair to say you let your words get away from you just a little bit. And what I was picking up, or what you were trying to talk about, was increasing participation within paddle sports generally, and especially increasing participation with female kayakers, or increasing that to closer to a 50-50 number than where we're at now. Is that a fair representation of what you were trying to achieve?
I think that's fair. Thanks for having me, by the way, dude. I've been listening to your old episodes lately, and I think you're doing an awesome job. Honestly, I think it's a lot of it to me was about appreciation and just the social dynamic between men and women in the sport. And so I had some observations that I wanted to share, I just kind of forgot that we were recording for the public, I definitely got away from myself there.
Like from listening to it, I was like, okay, it was just a bit overfamiliar, and I could see where you were trying to go to, but also like I could see your mouth moving just a little bit faster than your filter was going,
Mm-hmm.
So putting that to one side, like I understand you're cool with the Hammer Factor guys now. What I want to talk about with you on this episode was specifically about ways that we can work together as a community to increase participation in paddle sports overall, and maybe also increase like having more female paddlers. But I'm scheduling another one of these with Anna Levesque soon. She's like pretty OG about getting ladies involved in kayaking. So if you've got something to add to the conversation right now about increasing participation, we can all do to work together, I think that's a strong start point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think I have the answers to that. But I used to work at a summer camp, Valley Mill, and it was interesting. Sometimes it seemed like only the boys were interested in kayaking, and then there were certain groups of girls that were really into it, and even more into it. So I think at that young age, it's really about having fun. It's about having fun with your friends, especially, and maybe that's true of all ages, but also acceptance. And if kayaking, where I grew up here in DC, even though DC is a very cosmopolitan, international, and overly majority female city, the kayaking community, at least at Great Falls and then somewhat in the racing scene, was overwhelmingly male, and it was very obvious from a young age that this is a male-dominated sport. And since I've got older and I've traveled a bit more, you go to other places like the Southeast and Idaho, where that's not the case necessarily, or there's a lot more certainly a lot more female participation, and at the high levels of the sport too. But you could make it about, individual states and factors like that. But at the most basic level, kayaking has to be fun, and people have to feel accepted in the community, and that's what's going to grow the sport, I think.
I agree with you 100%. I think it's all about having fun, and I think hooking people in younger the better. Like you were saying, like if you can get them, when they're at that like kids age, that's a prime start time where you can really start to get into it and really enjoy it. And especially now versus when I was a kid, there's like more access to like better equipment and like more correct sizes of gear. You can paddle for longer and do more, and it's a lot easier than like being 100-pound kid and a dancer. It's like a lot of the cards are stacked for the kids now, but we as a community need to be working together a bit more to kind of pull more people in and make kayaking more exciting and, like you said, more inclusive. If you had to pick something that every single person could do, like one small thing, what do you think it would be that would be the most useful maneuver that we could do to start pulling more people in?
Well, just for me, what I've been trying to do is take my relatives paddling. And so I went out kayaking here on the Potomac with my niece and my nephew over Labor Day, and they had a really good time. It was kind of a lot of work for me to arrange for boats and gear for everyone. But I mean, just the result is so worth it. They're stoked on it. They want to seek out whitewater opportunities where they live in Nashville, and so I feel like I did something good, and I'm even though it's easy to family is easy, easier maybe in some ways, especially when you have kids that age. But I don't really know. I'm a little bit in a unique situation where I'm not the right person to ask about that.
And so let's put a pin in that then, and we'll circle back around to it. Let's talk about shredder ladies. There's tons of them out there. I've paddled with a lot of rad ladies who I love kayaking with. There is a lot of them out there, but like you were saying, not in your community. What do you think it is about those certain communities that don't seem to have of them, and what can we do to improve that?
Well, I think part of the reason at Great Falls is because this is a mostly Class 2 river, Class 2, 3, and then you have one giant Class 5 rapid. So you have to travel a lot to get good enough to run Great Falls. And DC, adults tend not to stay in DC for long periods of time. Anyways, enough about that. But I guess in the other places I've gone out west, especially, people get into kayaking at whatever age because it's an outlet, it's fun, it's something they can do with people their age, and especially if there's no, gender obstacle, if people then I think women can go as far as the men. And I think that's one of the awesome. I've seen that. There's plenty of people progressing. Who comes from all walks of life. When they have that opportunity to paddle Class 3, paddle Class 4, paddle Class 5 with solid groups of people who are encouraging, and and they feel a part of the sport. They feel connected to it. I don't know if that's quite the answer you were looking for, but
no, I mean, I think we probably, like, as kayakers who are listening to this, will all be able to resonate. Like, you continue to kayak because you're part of a community, and especially, I don't know if it's true for everyone, but I always felt like a bit of an outlier for a lot of other social groups. But for kayaking, it's like you're like with a group of other people who are in that similar like outlier position, and doing kayaking engages your brain in a way that maybe other sports don't necessarily engage them.
yeah. For me,
And sorry, go ahead.
well, for me, it was very goal oriented. When I was a kid, I wanted to race. I wanted to compete, and that's maybe not typical, and maybe not the most pure part of the sport, the competitive side. But I loved it. I loved training. Even I loved going out and paddling my wild water boat. Upstream. On practically flat water. For hours at a time, and everyone finds their own zen in their own way. And that's one of the great things about paddling is you don't have to paddle whitewater. And if you do paddle whitewater, you don't have to paddle hard whitewater. There's plenty of people out there who are really, really good paddlers. And I'm talking about, men as well as women, but probably especially women who, get to a point where they're paddling the rivers they want to paddle and they don't feel compelled to push it higher and farther because they just want it to be what it is. And I think maybe as men, we are drawn more to push it higher and farther and scarier. And I know I am, or I was. I mean, I'm getting a little bit older now and maybe a bit more conservative.
Yeah,
But
I think we can all agree that wherever your happy spot for like whatever you want to be doing, whether it's like pursuing new freestyle or pursuing new races or attaining or paddling flat water or paddling long distances, like however you get your day on the river, like probably the one thing that everybody has in common is that their day on the river is like the best day ever. And it's like the thing they look forward to most. Whether you get your day on the river once a week or once a fortnight or once a month or every day, we all look forward to that time on the water. Why, like, what's the easy message you could share to people who are non-kayakers? Like, if you had to like boil down why you like so much about kayaking into 2 sentences, what would you say?
this is a great one. I've been waiting for this. It's nature's recreation. It's natural recreation. It was given to us. Like whether or not you believe in God, this is the whitewater is a gift to us from the planet, and it's pure. It's just pure fun. It's challenging. It can be dangerous, but we have these resources, these rivers, especially in North America here, that are just such an incredible resource for fun and for recreation. And as I said, you can paddle upstream, downstream, flat water or 100-foot waterfalls, whatever you want to, and to start out in kayaking, you don't have to have that goal to be the best. You just getting in a kayak and appreciating the natural spaces that we've been able to preserve and just finding that experience that you're looking for. I think I wish everyone could be able to do that because there's so much going on in the world right now, and especially if you live in an urban area, to be able to go out on the river and appreciate nature and go to these places that we're lucky enough to go. I think there's something very compelling about it, and I wish we could share it with more people who, don't have the opportunity to experience it.
Okay, let's flip the conversation on its head a little bit. In your community, because that's like where you're like probably have the most relevant answers for. What are the 5 like biggest barriers to entry that would stop people going kayaking, going whitewater kayaking especially?
Yeah, cost.
Okay.
Well, and it depends what you mean by my community, because I feel like I'm in many different communities now.
Well, wherever you wherever you say it would be your home run, and that's like so for me, I would say the Ottawa River is my home community, even though I'm from London, England. But I would say I live here now, and like this is home, and I would say my home river is the Ottawa. So wherever you would say your home river is, whether that's the Potomac or whether that's Little White, I don't know, like
yeah, no, it's the Potomac.
you tell me, and then let's run through the 5 biggest barriers to entry through in your community right now.
Well, this won't be typical, but maybe traffic.
Okay.
Busy schedules, team sports. I'm talking about kids in this instance, but just the hustle and bustle of daily life and all the distractions that are out there. Mm-hmm. Cost. The cost of getting into whitewater kayaking is a big one for everyone. Even if you're living in this area, you're probably doing pretty well. but it is an expensive sport to get into. Even if you're buying all used gear, and then the lessons, learning. It's unless you're lucky enough to have someone to teach you kayaking, it's very questionable. We try to avoid, and I think this is true of most communities. You can get away with a little bit here because of the river we have here. But you can't learn kayaking on your own. You need a guru, you need a mentor, you need a buddy, someone who's done it. Whether it's someone to learn with you at the same time, or and in to watch your back while you try to teach each other to roll. But for most people, it's taking lessons and spending more money on instructors, clinics, pool rolling, um, all of the above, and trying to meet people who are either similar ability or luckily a little bit better, so they can help you. And that can be really difficult. Uh, and for some communities, it's easy to break into that, and in other communities, it's very difficult to get that group that will help you along.
So Geoff, what's the club scene like in your area? Because I think for a lot of people, like especially in England, for me growing up, like the club scene is pretty strong, and there's a lot of access where you can pay a small amount and have access to like some middle of the road good gear, boats, paddles, helmets, life jackets, even coaching and people to help you learn. What's it like in your area?
Yeah, man, we've been hearing about the club scene, and we kind of wish we had that here. I think it would do really well here, but unfortunately, it's just not exactly the case. There certainly are some clubs in the region, but I'm not super familiar with them, and it's not like showing up at a clubhouse and getting a membership. It's still a community that you have to kind of work your way into. And again, this is not. I'm a little bit outside of my realm here, but at least here, at right in the lower Potomac near Great Falls, it is a pretty well connected scene. But you probably do have to get in with an outfitter somehow if you want to if you to meet those new people. It's possible that go to the river every day and just be friendly and meet people, but the best way to do it is to fall in with Kaleva, which is a big outdoor program around here, and they do all sorts of things. And there's several other smaller outfitters as well that have paddling groups of a variety of levels, and they do more than just instruction. They all paddle together. They do workouts together. The big thing in this area is to train for the cheat race, and so people dust off their long boats in February, March, and get out on the river even when it's still high, and start paddling and get back in shape and do some long distance workouts in their kayak. And come May at Cheat Fest, we show up at the cheat race in mass, for a race and a good time. I think we have a great little scene here in the DC area, but it is unique in its own way. And I think, as I've kind of alluded to, it can be hard to break in as a rank beginner and kind of figure out, what you should do, especially if you're adverse to spending money on lessons.
Um, it's funny that I'm happy to hear you say that because it's kind of pivots my next talking point here. But it kind of like it rings really true. I think to a lot of people, it's like there's a lot of these great clubs out there, but if you don't know how to get in them, it's really hard to get started, and they maybe don't have a super regular schedule, or it's difficult to like you got to know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy to like find out where you're meant to be and at what time to get access to what's available to you. And so one of the things that, going back to our earlier topic of like what could we all do as paddlers to help get more people into kayaking, is I think for like as much as possible, like everyone should have a good knowledge of all the paddle clubs in their area, or at least the biggest two or three, and who to get in touch with or how to get in touch with someone to break into that circle. So when you meet those random friendly people by the river who are like, hey, I'm super interested in what you're doing, then you have that information to hand and you can be like, oh, cool. If you want to know more about it, there's this really cool paddling club and they meet on Tuesdays, down behind the boat shed there or whatever. And this is the Facebook group to get in touch with them, or this is the guy to call to organize you going there. And I think that would be like one, admittedly, like a small amount of like work for everyone to right now. But I think down the line, the ripple effect of just, if imagine like every time, like say you speak to like 3 random strangers at Great Falls every week who are just really interested in what you're doing, and they maybe don't want to do exactly what you're doing, but they want a little piece of that action. And if you had that like just on hand information, but oh hey, well, this is what I know about it, go check that out. And then even if your conversion rate was 1 in 3, that would still get like a huge amount more people. I don't know what the math works out to on that, but like, one extra person a week is 50 people a year extra. If everyone was doing 50 people a year, that'd be a lot of people, right?
No doubt. And, there's plenty of times when I wished I had business cards, or, someone else's business cards. And, it's like, oh, well, I should have every outfitter's business card at this point. Because, and the other thing that you bring that up is that people see us doing what we do, and they have this impression of whitewater kayaking as a daredevil sport. And it's kind of like people form that impression, and I feel like we have to kind of shake them of that. And it's a little unique here because they're watching us go off of a, high volume Class 5 rapid. And, it is a dangerous area. So we kind of have to convince people that, yeah, you can try this too. And if you just go like 2 miles downstream, it's a lot safer. And that's where we all learn to kayak. So
yeah, for sure, explaining to people that you don't start, on the double black diamond ski hill is like if you've got a couple of good on hand little things like that, I think that really helps to just get people's head right. And just, it seems to be that skiing and mountain biking, as because they're a little bit more popular, people can relate to it a little bit more.
Right. Well, everyone learns to ride a bike before they go mountain biking.
For sure. Like, it's the barrier to entry, right? Like, you've got to be able to ride. You can't not be able to ride a bike, go mountain biking.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point there. That brings me on to my next one. Is that like learning curve, guru, mentorship thing that we spoke about, that you identified as another like main barrier to people learning to kayak, not just in your area, but generally that's like a big barrier to entry. And although like clubs obviously can help with that a ton, it would be the onus at some point is on us as kayakers to start helping other kayakers, right? And whether that's just doing little bits for people who are like trying to catch up to where you are, or like introducing your nieces and nephews, like you were saying over Labor Day weekend. However much you can put into that, I think the onus has to start being kind of on everyone in our community to help grow it a bit bigger, because otherwise it's just going to be us out here.
I think so. I mean, I think the community is a good size, and sometimes certain areas you don't want it to get too big. But certainly we have.
Could you give an example? Sorry to stop. I'm going to cut you off here. Could you give an example where you wouldn't want your kayak community to get any bigger? I've never been to a place I could think of in my entire life where my main thought was like, fuck, there's a lot of kayakers here. I don't want any more to come.
Have you ever been to White Salmon?
I never have, no. But I've met a lot of people who are like, I'm from White Salmon.
Right. Well, the thing about White Salmon is there's not a lot of beginner terrain there. And it's a little bit tough to be a beginner there. There are, if you go a little bit away from it all, there is. But I was just kind of kidding with that. No, I'm going to backtrack off of that. We do need to grow paddling. I'm definitely all for that. I'm certainly for teaching people to learn slowly, safely, and gradually, and not just get straight into the hard stuff and having bad swims and all that. And that's why the Potomac is such a fantastic place to learn to kayak, dude. It is it's very similar to the Ottawa in some ways, where you have these big pools and then some, small, medium-sized rapids. Obviously not as big as the Ottawa, but you have this learning area.
Yeah, I've met a ton of rippers from the DC area. Big shout out to the Franenberg family. Those guys their kids are amazing. Like
Yeah, the
I've met a
first
ton of
family.
other kids. I've met a ton of other kids too from that area who I'm like, wow, we're like I wish I had learned. I wish I had the advantages that you have. Growing up in whatever paddling community you must be in, because they were like light years ahead of where I was when I was like 15.
Right. I mean, I got to try play boating, slalom, wild water, flat water, creek boats, long boats, squirt boats, all before I was, 19 years old.
That's great. Like that is completely mind-boggling to me, and I feel like I had a pretty good, for England, I had a pretty good go of learning to kayak in the area of London that I'm from. Like, it's crazy to me that there are places in the world that exist like that where you can try all of those different things in one place, and it's somewhat accessible.
Yeah, super accessible. Yeah, traffic might be a little bit of a problem, but yeah, we have it pretty good here for sure. And if it is growing though. You look at some place like Oklahoma City. They built a whitewater park, and it's a good one. I haven't been there, but people are stoked about it there. They have kids getting into it, and I think the same thing in Charlotte to some extent. It's growing the community, and we just got to figure out what these barriers and I think are to getting people into kayaking. And I think cost is certainly one of them, but there's also some social and opportunity barriers, and the people need to feel like kayaking is for them, and it's something they can do to get kids off the football field and onto the river.
Heck yes, I agree. I agree 100%. I think, and what I encourage for everyone at home who's listening to do is get on Google, get on Facebook, find out your 3 closest paddling clubs and how people can get in touch with that. And then every time somebody asks you how they start kayaking, you're going to have your answer preloaded in the cannon, ready to go. I hope everyone who is listening at home will do that, and I hope they'll encourage their friends to do that and their friends' friends to do that, because I think that is like one small thing that everybody can do that will make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think social media helps to some extent, but we need to also make sure that the social media we share is convinces people that kayaking is for them, and that we're not that we're not all daredevils, and even if some of us are, that we that kayaking is for everyone, and you're not going to get thrown into a class 4 rapid your first time in a boat.
Man, I'm so hyped. Actually, did you read the article that was doing the rounds a few weeks ago that was called "Your Beach Training's Not Cool"?
Yeah.
Hey, I've got the author of that article coming on tomorrow in my time, but I think everyone else will hear it in a week or two.
Yeah.
Pretty hyped to chat about that. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and John Grace and I both shared that article, but one thing that came out of that discussion was Lewis wrote. Are you still recording?
Yep.
Well, Lewis Geltman wrote an article about 10 years ago called "Style" in Site Z. Site Z is a website that has some really well thought articles, mostly about whitewater. But Lewis's article, I think, puts it in a much more concise way. I personally, I don't think beatering is cool, and that's why I shared the article. But everyone does beater. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that everyone needs to learn to paddle within their ability limits. And when you're paddling outside of your ability of your limits, and when you're constantly putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, it affects other people. And it's not just like you're out on the out on the river, like, by yourself, and it because, whether it's EMS or other paddlers, like, people do have a reason to care if you're when you're putting yourself in dangerous
Yeah, I
situations.
mean it's a team sport, right? Like as much as it's individual, it's like we're all in this together. Like whoever, all those people you put on with, like they rely on you as much as you rely on them.
Certainly, and I think there's also some responsibility, and this is a way out there topic, but when you go solo boating, which a lot of us do, you're putting a lot, you're taking a lot of other people's concerns with you. If you're out on the river and something happens to you, people are going to have to come looking for you. And it's important that we remember that we don't live in a vacuum, and especially here at like at Great Falls, for example, where if you have a bad line, or if you swim, if you're, like, someone's going to literally call a helicopter to come get you. And that's taxpayer dollars. It's bad exposure for kayaking. I've been that person, swimming in front of 100 people, and having the rescue boats and the helicopter respond. It's not a good feeling, and it's not a good image. The only saving grace is that the local rescue squad is strapped for cash in their budget, and so when they get a call for something like that, it's a good opportunity for them to come out and do some training exercises, and maybe rescue some supposedly expert kayakers. Um, but yeah, we have to think about what our effect is as kayakers on larger culture, because people, it's not just like, the little white you put on and you don't see another soul until the takeout, unless you see somebody, a couple making out at Spirit or something like that. But but yeah, here you're being watched, and and people are taking video of you, and they're watching you, and they are forming opinions about kayaking based on how well you run the rapid. And I think the idea here at Great Falls is run the rapid and make it look like you've done it before, even if you haven't. So that's kind of why I myself and others have this protectionist attitude, that come out here, scout it, but you know don't run it until you're absolutely sure that you're ready and you're with people who are willing to take, to help you out and show you around.
Cool. Well, Geoff, we've got a bit off topic here from how to increase participation in paddle sports, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about. So let's wrap it up there. Let's call this a good interview. I think some people are going to have some good takeaways from this. I hope that we can all work together as a community to get more people involved in whitewater at all levels and across all genres, whatever that is that makes people happy. Geoff, how can people follow you on the social channels if they were so inclined?
Yeah, my Instagram is gcalhoun9, and my YouTube account is at Calhoose, and that's CALHOOOSE. So that's 3 O's.
I didn't even know you had a YouTube, Geoff. I can't wait to look at it.
Oh, dude, yeah, it's I don't really do a lot of editing. It's mostly raw files, but I do actually have
Okay.
some. So I throw like, a clip up there every once in a while, but I do have a few edited films as well, and
Great. Can't wait
but
to check that out.
yeah, and I'm on Facebook too, obviously, but yeah, I
If
don't know.
anyone's grandma wants to find you, I guess that's where they'll look you up.
Yeah, Instagram's cool. Whatever the kids are into these days, I don't know.
Cool.